Hello, Petals. How you doing? How are things going? How's life been? Apologies for the absence throughout the past week, but as you can hear, I still have a bit of a croaky throat, and there's not really much I can do for you when I've got a croaky throat and hay fever and I'm all snotty and snuffling and all that sort of thing. But please, as ever, put in the comments, let me know how you're doing, let me know how you're going, how are things, and yeah, let me know how things are in your part of the world. I'm going to not stand on any ceremonies today, and I'm just going to crack on and get on with it. God, it was a really busy week last week. My crikey. Okay then, so, Paint Your Dragon by the amazing and wonderful Mr. Thomas of Holt, Chapter 3. Having parked his shape in Victoria Square, the dragon ambled down Colmore Row to Snow Hill and consulted the railway timetable. 3 minutes later, a rather bemused train pulled up. Narrator's note, a train being bemused. That's a concept. That's why Thomas Holt is amazing. I digress. Wondering, among other things, how the hell it had managed to get there from Dumfries in 180 seconds. Narrator's note again, I've actually done that train journey from Dumfries to Darnton, and 180 seconds doesn't happen. I digress. And he climbed aboard. Colchester, he said aloud. The voice of the train, inaudible to everyone except the dragon, pointed out that the Snow Hill line doesn't go to Colchester. The dragon smiled pleasantly and invited the train to put its money where its mouth was. Alighting at Colchester, a place he had heard of but never actually been to, the dragon took a taxi to 35 Vespasian Street, explained to the driver, and climbed the stairs. The top floor of 35 Vespasian Street is given over to a suite of offices consisting of a chair, a desk, a computer terminal, an electric kettle, an anomaly in the telephone network, and 743 filing cabinets. The door says, L. Courtright Associates, Supernatural Agency. Lynn Courtright was on the anomaly when the dragon walked in. He was explaining to Horus, the Egyptian charioteer of the sun, that simply picking it up, moving it along in a straight line, and putting it down again without dropping it was no longer good enough to guarantee him full employment, and he had considered, for example, juggling with it or balancing it on a stick while riding a unicycle. As the door opened, he didn't look up, merely made a go-away gesture. He was about to suggest training it to do simple tricks when he noticed that the receiver was back on its cradle, and he was, in fact, talking to the palm of his hand. He raised his eyes, impressed. "Hey," he said, "how'd you do that?" "Do what?" "It's purely instinctive with you, huh? No matter. What can I do for you?" "I'm looking," the dragon replied, sitting on a chair last seen 2 seconds previously under an actuary in Stroud and still quite warm. "For a job. I imagine you might be able to help." Mr. Courtright studied the chair for a while and then nodded. "Possibly. Possibly," he said. "What do you do?" "What needs doing?" Mr. Courtright frowned. No, he said. "That's not the way it works. You gotta have an act before you come bothering me. Let's see, you can do telekinesis, right?" "Can I?" "Oh boy, a natural." Mr. Courtright sighed, rather as St. Sebastian would have done if, just as the last arrow thudded home in his ribcage, he also remembered he'd left home without switching off the oven. Don't get me wrong," he added. "Maybe I can still find you something, if you don't mind touring. Done any poltergeisting?" The dragon's brow furrowed in thought until he looked like a fight between 2 privet hedges. Ever since he'd come back, he'd been letting his subconscious fill in as many of the gaps as possible, mostly by opening a direct line from his exceptional ears to his memory. In consequence, the backlots of his brain were stuffed with thousands of unprocessed eavesdroppings, waiting to be filtered and condensed into usable, ready-to-wear background information. "Poltergeists," he mused, accessing a fragment of a documentary overheard when the taxi drove within a mile of a TV showroom.
That's a ghost or similar evil spirit who throws things. Yes? Yup. No. Sorry.
Mr. Cartwright's shoulders rose and fell like share prices during a closely contested election.
Okay, he said. You want to learn? Not really, no. All seems a bit gratuitous, if you ask me. And besides, I don't plan on being here very long, so there's little point learning new skills.
Picky, huh?
You got a nerve.
Several, replied the dragon absently.
In this body, anyway. The other one's just animated rock.
Now, it took Mr. Cartwright's brain 3/4 of a second to pick up on the words "this body" and "the other one," speculate on the significance, and dismiss the whole as too much hassle.
So, what did you used to do? Have you got an act then?
The dragon nodded.
I flew about, breathing fire, making rain, that style of thing. Dragon, huh? You're very perceptive.
Now, after a moment's hesitation, Mr. Cartwright correctly interpreted the dragon's remark as a compliment.
Not much around at the moment for dragons, he said. Endangered species regulations, he added. Ugh.
Now, this seemed to confirm what the dragon had assumed about a national dragon shortage.
So, dragons are protected, are they?
Mr. Cartwright grinned.
Dragons, he said. No way. Nothing in the legislation about dragons. Now, crocodiles, yes, which means the supply of raw material for the handbag trade is down to last knockings. But, if you're good, you can make dragon look like crocodile. You get my meaning.
A corner of the dragon's mouth twitched.
I seem to remember you people having a saying, he said. First catch your... Been away a long time, have you?
The Cartwright grin widened until it looked like the aftermath of seismic activity.
In which case, here's a tip for you. If you're flying along and you see something long and grey and kind of tube-shaped with little fins coming straight at you, don't try chatting it up or asking it out to the movies. They call them wire-guided missiles. And, yes, thanks, said the dragon. I found out about those 4 myself, so there are still dragons about then. People seem to react as if I'm extinct or something. In these parts, Mr. Cartwright explained, you are. In this century, in fact. That doesn't worry transtemporal poachers any. It just means that by the time they market the goods, they're also genuine antiques and therefore legal to sell. Oh.
The dragon shrugged.
But so long as I am now, I'm relatively safe. Safe?
Mr. Cartwright savoured the word.
From poachers, maybe. I mean, chances are, if you stick around any year with 19 on the front of it, you won't suddenly find yourself full of powder compacts with a zip up your back. There are, he added, other dangers. Thought that might be the case, the dragon replied, which is precisely why I'm in plain clothes and looking for a job. You see, I have things to do in the here and now. Once they're done, I'm off somewhere, and when, a little less paranoid. While I'm here, though, I thought a job would help pass the time and help me blend in. Very wise. So,
Mr. Cartwright went on, steepling his fingers.
Where are we at? Ex-dragon? Ex-dragon. Now then, let me see.
The dragon waited patiently while Mr. Cartwright played with his computer.
Any luck?
Mr. Cartwright pursed his lips.
Well, he said, like I say to all the kids just starting out in the business, when you're trying to make your way, sometimes you've got to do things you would rather not do. You sure about poltergeisting? Positive. Shucks. Hey, what's this?
He peered at the screen.
I can get you 6 weeks volcanic activity in Hawaii, covering for the local fire god while he takes his kids to Disneyland. All you gotta do is lie on your back and blow up through a small hole. Sorry, got to be in this country. Anyway, where's Hawaii? Please yourself. Gonna be difficult though. How do you feel about hallucinations? I beg your pardon. Hallucinations for health-conscious people that are of a addictive nature. All the weird visions without actually taking their particular, thing of choice, growth area, steady work. Not really me, somehow. I'd feel self-conscious. Besides, don't you have to be a pink elephant? Boy, are you behind the times.
Mr. Cartwright frowned and tapped a few more keys.
Okay, you're going to love this. This is really so you, security guard. Security guard. It says here, traditional security guard needed for substantial art collection, full board. The successful applicant will be at least 14 feet long, green and covered in scales. No time wasters. There now, what can I say? Okay, said the dragon. When can I start?
George sailed through the air in a graceful arc and landed in a dustbin. Behind him came a voice, warmly recommending that he stay out. Now, after a short pause for regrouping, he climbed out, brushed trash off his person, and staggered away down the alley.
Seems like old times,
he said to himself, getting slung out of drinking establishments. Some things had changed, of course. For one thing, getting slung out was now a whole lot easier. Definitely a regrettable tendency to overreact. His mind drifted back to the bars of his youth. Pendle's, the roughest Saints bar in Albion. The Carlier Grill, the Grendel's Torso. What the hell was wrong with this flipping country? Half an hour's slouching, lurching and bumping into things brought him back to Victoria Square, and he realised that he didn't have anywhere to sleep for the night. He saw...
Immediately, said Mr. Cartwright. Here's the address. Do well.
The dragon trotted down the stairs into the street and whistled. A moment later, a huge green shape, flying faster than the wind, descended on him, and he vanished. An empty plinth. He thought of his nice, warm statue, good, solid marble that didn't wobble about all over the place like this blasted cheapskate flesh and blood outfit did. Climbing the plinth, he sighed, closed his eyes, and was stone once more. "I'm not saying," said Chubby Stevenson, his brain racing, "it's impossible. Nothing's impossible. All I'm saying is, it's going to be tricky." 15 impassive tourist faces regarded him until he began to feel like asking for his blindfold and last cigarette. These people, he realised, don't want to hear this. Pity. "It's all to do," he continued, cramming charm into the metre of his smile, "with the fundamental nature of time. Now, with my supplies of raw time, I can prolong the present, no problem. In certain circumstances, I can sometimes recreate the past, not travel back in time. Now, that is impossible. Nobody can do that. What I sometimes do, for specially favoured customers, is make a synthetic recreation of a specific episode from the past using a raw time base, and they were not interested. He wasn't answering the question they'd asked him. Phew, these guys. The future, he therefore said, is something else entirely. Future's different from past and present, see. Future hasn't happened yet. If it hasn't happened, we don't know what it's like. If you don't know what it's like, you can't copy it. Now." One of the 15 leaned forward and, terribly politely, cleared his throat. With respect, his expression said. His lips didn't move and he didn't make a noise, but there was no need. Just as you don't need to speak fluent gunt, nor that when a .44 revolver stares at you with its one big eye, it is politely informing you that you are very likely going to be unalived in the next immediacy. They knew this already. What they didn't know, and what they wanted him to tell them, was whether it was possible to arrange an artificial future in which certain specified events would happen, and if so, how much would it cost? If he didn't know the answer, the expression continued, then perhaps he would be good enough to say so. Chubby sighed and got a grip on himself. "It can be done," he said. "The principle is quite straightforward, simple even. The practicalities..." "Please explain the practicalities." "OK, it's all relativity, right? Travel faster than light around the Earth to accelerate forward through time. Once you're there, or do I mean then, mama? You set up whatever it is you want to happen in the future. Like, you want to bet heavily on the Super Bowl. You fast forward to the day of the match, see who wins. Now you can place your bet, provided you can get back to your own time, or get a message back anyhow. Obviously, you can't get back yourself because Parside travels out, see above. Sending a message, though, that's no problem." "Really?"
"Trade secret,"
Chubby said. Now, normally he would have winked as well, but there was something about the wall of stone-faced scrutiny opposite him that put him off that particular idea.
"We can do it anyhow. The technical problem, of course, is finding your faster-than-light career."
"A soluble problem?"
"I feel sure we can sort it out."
Chubby lied.
"Of course, if we knew we'd be successful, we'd just get the courier to report back from the future on how we'd managed it, the same time as he passes back the Super Bowl results. But that's a bit to miss as far as I'm concerned. Sloppy, you know."
Indeed, the 15 did. Sloppiness, the expression gave him to understand, was anathema to them. Chubby painted a smile over the cracks in his composure and continued.
"So," he said, "you boys are going to have to let our R&D people kick this one around for a day or two. As soon as we've got the answer, you will report back to us in 48 hours.
Very well." Chubby's Adam's apple bobbed like a Formula One lift.
"When I said a day or two, I didn't actually mean 2 days. I meant..."
"You are already suggesting a postponement. 72 hours, then."
"How would it be,"
Chubby croaked,
"if we call you when we're ready to roll? It'd be as quick as we can, naturally."
"You are asking for an indefinite postponement while you attempt to find a way to do this."
"Yes,
we would prefer," said 15 expressions simultaneously, "a specified time limit. That is the way we do business. We trust you can accommodate us on this point."
"Just give me a week, will you?"
Chubby's tone suggested that he was Faust offering the devil double or quits, and even as he spoke, a small, rather naive part of his brain demanded, "Why are you so scared of these guys?"
"By then I'll have definite plans, costings and all that kind of stuff ready for you to see. Agreed?"
Long pause. It was like the moment of thoughtful hesitation on the 7th day just before man, having been assured by God that it was a nice little runner, genuine low mileage. Normally you only get oceans of this quality on the top of the range models. Said, "OK, we'll take it." Then 15 heads nodded. A moment later, the conference room was empty, and a helicopter engine started up somewhere on the roof.
"Hooray," said Chubby wretchedly to himself. "I guess I've landed this really big contract."
It was a dirty, rotten job. Blink! A tiny globe of lime-rich water dripped from cavern roof to floor. But someone's got to do it, apparently. This stuff is so uncomfortable. Traditional security guard, substantial art collection. Whoever drafted that advertisement had probably spent some time in the estate agency business, learning in the process the art of making statements that are almost, but not quite, downright untrue. Now, the art collection was housed in a cave 200 feet below the Pennine Hills and consisted of about 300 tons weight of gold tableware. Very old, very vulgar, and extremely unpleasant to lie on. Cold. Hard. Lots of handles and knobs and scutcheons to dig in ear. Plus, of course, the alluring prospect of being woken up just as soon as you've dropped off by some amateur hero with weapons, desperate courage, and a fleet of lorries outside the cave mouth with their engines running. It was as bad as being a guard dog, and he didn't even have a little ball with his name on it. The job, the dragon decided, sucks. Hello? The voice was still some way off, high-pitched, almost feminine, a ploy, thought the dragon, and a piss-poor one at that. Pound to a penny, it's some muscular git in tin overalls making his voice sound funny to put me off me guard. He breathed in, savouring the mellow warmth of his own breath. Anybody home? Only one way he can come, and that's straight through that hole there. Just let him poke his head through, and his mates will have to carry him home in an asbestos bag. Ah, there you are. The head, as he'd predicted, appeared, but it was female. There was no helmet, no nodding white plume. The dragon was so surprised, he swallowed his breath and got hiccups. Nasty. Are you, said the female, Mr. Wayne Popper? The dragon looked at her. My name, she went on, is Marjorie Evans, Inland Revenue. A tiny flare of green fire spurted from the dragon's right ear, evidence of the rather complex and horrible ear, nose and throat difficulties he was currently experiencing.
Is that so? He croaked. Look, I do have a certain discretion in these matters, so I'm going to count up to 5, and then... Oh, hush it. Do excuse me, please.
For a few moments, the darkness of the cavern was illuminated by the sort of firework display you generally only get to see when there's an important royal wedding. Bless you, said Miss Evans, instinctively fumbling in her bag for a tissue. Sorry, you did say you are Mr. Popper?
I didn't say anything, replied the dragon, confused. Now get the hell out of here, before I incinerate you.
I'll take that, replied Miss Evans briskly, as a yes. She straightened her back, took out a notebook and looked around, miming seeing the gold for the first time. Well then, she said, what have we here? Now, inside the dragon's brain, a debate was raging. The traditionalists were saying, you fool, here's a blasted hero, well, all right, heroine, come and nick the goodies, so why the hell don't you just torture PDQ and have done with it? In another part of his brain, however, his loyal opposition was arguing that actually she'd given no indication that she was here to steal anything. She wasn't armed. She'd even offered a tissue when he sneezed. So what? Retorted the traditionalists. I don't want to carbonise her, replied the opposition. She hasn't done me any harm. Chicken, taunted the old guard. No, replied the other lot. Dragon, same number of wings, but bigger and twice the legs.
It's a pile of gold,
replied the dragon in the meantime. Is it really? Miss Evans was writing in the book. Could you possibly explain to me how you came by it?
Said the dragon. I'm, looking after it for somebody else.
As the woman looked at him, non-aggressive, pacific even, smiling slightly in a mildly cynical way through thick lens spectacles, the dragon was aware of a feeling he hadn't had for so long. He could only just put a name to it. It disconcerted him. No end. He felt like he was in trouble. Really, said the woman, and might I ask who this other person might be? This, said the ruling majority in the dragon's brain, is crazy. One little puff and she's ash. No sword, no armour, and it isn't even my treasure, so why do I feel as if I've just been caught with my talon in the biscuit tin?
A friend,
the dragon mumbled, not sure where the words he was saying were coming from.
Or rather, a bloke I met in a pub. Didn't catch his name. Just look after this lot for me, he said. Won't be a tick.
I see. That was all she said. I see. In the old days, when the dragon took to the air, the roads leading the opposite direction were clogged with nose-to-tail handcarts. He hiccuped again. "Gesundheit," said the woman.
Said
the dragon, his vocal cords sandpaper.
"Is there a problem?"
The woman closed her notebook, clicked her biro, and put them both away. "Mr. Popper," she said, "let me be frank with you. I have to say I'm not really very happy with your story. I don't have to tell you. Defrauding the revenue is no laughing matter." For some reason he couldn't account for at all, the unfamiliarity of the concept, perhaps, or the bewildering lack of terror on the woman's part. The last 3 words she'd spoken were perhaps the most unnerving things he'd ever heard a mortal say. When you consider that they were competing against such strong contenders as "Take your 10,000 archers round the back of the hill, we'll attack you from here with our 20,000 cavalry, and if he had any idea that we'd just put it in there, he wouldn't be drinking it." Maybe you can get a vague glimpse at the dragon's complete bewilderment.
"All right," he said. "I'm not Mr. Popper. I just work for him."
The woman smiled. It was actually quite a pleasant smile. In her spare time, she probably made fur fabric mouse bookmarks. "I had already guessed that, Mr.
Dragon."
"Mr. Dragon." She pulled out the notebook again. "But there is such a thing as being an accessory, you know. I really would urge you to cooperate with us."
"Sure."
A minor seismic event, last echo of the hiccups, wafted blue flame out the dragon's left ear. "If only," snarled his subconscious, "I could accidentally sneeze at her. All they'd ever find would be charcoal, and I wouldn't even have done it on purpose." But no sneeze came, and the dragon had to suffer the indignity of listening to himself telling the woman everything he knew about the job. Mr. Popper's enormous property deals, payments made in gold for, what had he called it, fiscal convenience? All kinds of things he scarcely understood himself. While she wrote carefully, nodded and then closed her notebook, thanked him very politely, and left the way she'd come. A moment after that, he inflated both lungs and blew the biggest flare of extra hot red fire he'd ever managed in his life. It melted the walls of the cavern, but it didn't reach Miss Evans. He could hear her 1.5 inch heels still clippity-clopping down the winding tunnel. Thanks to his belated efforts, however, the hole in the wall was now almost sealed off, and he couldn't get through to press home the attack.
"Shit!" he roared. "What's happening to me?"
Nobody said anything, but his deranged imagination made him believe that, in the dying echoes of his own roar, he heard a mocking voice asking him whose side was he on. "Quite soon," Bianca said, "I shall have had enough of this."
"I think you ought to tell someone,"
Mike replied, calmly folding the tarpaulin which, removed a moment or so ago, had revealed St. George returned and the dragon gone.
"There's 2 possible explanations, and one of them demands that we believe in the existence of a practical joker with access to helicopters and heavy lifting gear, who's capable of swapping enormously heavy statues around in the centre of Birmingham at dead of night without anybody noticing."
"That's absurd."
"Obviously. Therefore," Mike continued, "we're dealing with the boring old supernatural. You've got to tell someone, otherwise it'll invalidate your insurance."
Bianca scowled. "That's absurd too," she said.
"Tell you something else that's absurd while I'm at it,"
Mike responded, shoving the folded tarpaulin into a cardboard box.
"And that's bloody great statues playing hide-and-seek with themselves in a public space."
"We can't tell anyone," Bianca objected. "They'd never believe us. They'd lock us out in the nut house."
"Maybe," Mike shrugged. "At least then this would be someone else's problem. Right now I could fancy somewhere dark and cool with bendy wallpaper."
Bianca was silent for a moment. Then she started to rummage in her tool bag. "I know one thing I am going to do," she said.
"Oh, yes?"
"I'm going to chip off that ridiculous moustache." Dismissed without references for gross breach of confidentiality, the dragon swished its tail dispiritedly and flew east. En route, it had a run-in with 3 F3s, hastily scrambled by a gibbering controller at Bryce Norton and armed with everything for the Christmas had left in the RAF stocking for the last 6 years. In due course, the pilots ejected and, save for a broken leg and some bruises, landed safely. Most of the bits of aeroplane came down in the sea, which the dragon mused as it continued its flight, only makes the business with the taxwoman all the more disturbing.
"Guy," said Mr. Cartwright, having heard the tale, "believe me, you were right to trust your instincts. You just don't tangle with those people, not ever. Shame about the job, but you did right. Besides," he added with a shrug, "there's the morality of the thing to consider. The forces of evil got to stick together, right? I beg your pardon."
Mr. Cartwright gave him a puzzled look.
"Evil," he said. "Your team. You represent the forces of darkness, and so do they. You go welshing on your own kind, you'll never work in this business again."
From Colchester, Mr. Cartwright promised him faithfully to let him know as soon as anything suitable came up. He flew fast and high to the Midlands, found his plinth and porked. Getting out of the cavern had used up most of his fuel supply, and dealing with the aircraft had polished off the rest. He was tired and upset, and he needed a rest. Evil? What did the little creeper mean? Evil. George woke up. Deep down in the very marrow of the stone, his head hurt. He felt sick. What, he asked himself, would come up if I was? Probably gravel. There was something underneath him. Slowly, moving his head was a wild, scary thing to do, comparable to setting off in 3 small boats to find the way back to India. He looked down. He looked up again, rather more quickly.
"Oh, God," he said to himself, "please let me be hallucinating."
A tentative prod with the toe persuaded him otherwise. Horribly solid, sphincter-loosingly real.
"And I'm directly above it."
He waited. When the dragon didn't make a move, he risked breathing. Still no reaction. With extreme diffidence, he reached down and prodded with the point of his sword. Kink! Nothing. It was only a statue. Nothing more.
"Fuck that," George reflected. "So am I, and people who live in marble overcoats shouldn't prod dragons."
He waited a little longer, each second dragging by like a double geography lesson. He wasn't at all sure that he understood how this statue business worked, but either the dragon simply wasn't at home, or it was waiting for him to make a move. In the latter case, staying put was simply prolonging the inevitable. He braced himself, took a deep breath, and jumped. Now the crowd rushed up to meet him like a long-lost creditor. He landed, swore, and roared. His head protested in the strongest possible terms. The dragon didn't move. He stood up. "Gotcha!" He had now, of course, shed the marble and was back in a conventional human skin, but not because Bianca's voice and the slap of her hand on his shoulder made him jump out of it. He said, "Eek!" and turned white, all in an impressively short space of time. "And where the hell do you think you're going?" His brain reported back off sick leave and mentioned to him that the creature holding his arm was not a dragon so much as a defenceless girl.
"That's all right, then."
He put the palm of his hand in her face and shoved. Then he ran. A moment later, he was lying on his nose, a state of affairs he was able to trace back to someone grabbing hold of his feet.
"Get off!" he screeched. "There's a bastarding dragon after."
Then Bianca hit him on the head with a 2-pound mallet. We are having a lot of fun today. Seriously, I'm loving this. I'm very grateful for this stream. Thank you to Fat Cat Gaming and Rose Brady for being absolutely wonderful. We love you. And I've got to admit, having these little live streams is actually quite fun because I learn the most wonderful things. I never knew that butterflies have 0 sense of direction. Randomly changing direction helps avoid being eaten by predators, and that's from Flat Cat Gaming. We love this. Flutterflies, butterflies, moustaches. It's been one heck of a recording today. I love this so much. But take it easy. Stay safe. Keep warm, keep cool, keep hydrated. And yes, I'll be back soon. Take it easy, Petal. Have fun.